Hi everyone and welcome once again to Ruby's Classic Cooking. And today I am making pineapple upside down cake. Now this is an old classic from the 60s when pineapple was still considered somewhat of an exotic thing. With this recipe you can make peach upside down cake, pineapple upside down cake, or rhubarb upside down cake. So the recipe kind of has different variations, and you can even put apple slices in the bottom of this and make apple upside down cake if you like. Oh, but today it'll be pineapple upside down cake from your good old fashioned can. So, diving right into the recipe, this is a 14 ounce, or I think it's about 430 milliliters of pineapple, and it has 9 pineapple rings in it. I also have some good old fashioned red maraschino cherries to put in the middle of them. Real old school. I have got my 3 tablespoons of butter in here, and you can add a little more if you want to. I've melted in the bottom of my 8-inch square Pyrex pan. And don't worry, metric people, because I'll have the metric equivalents in the description file down below. So to this, right away, I'm going to add a half a cup of lightly packed brown sugar. Okay, I have a quarter of a cup in here, so I'm going to make 2/4 cups of lightly packed brown sugar additions to my melted butter. Then I'll add my pineapple slices. Okay, well that's a half a cup of lightly packed brown sugar added to my melted butter down here. Now there's my half a cup of brown sugar kind of combined with my melted butter in the bottom of my 8-inch square pan. And now I'm going to add my topping, which is going to be my can of pineapple. Now back in those days, they didn't have fresh pineapple, so they did canned pineapple was the only kind of pineapple they did. So there's 5 rings that go in here. Now I want to add some more, so I'm just going to cut these rings in half, or just break them in half. Got a couple more here. Okay, so I'm going to take my maraschino cherries, which I have drained very nicely, and I'm just going to pop them in the middle of my pineapple circles, like so. And I'm also going to add a few here on the other parts of this cake, just to give some more cherries to the other people who get a piece of cake, and not just the ones who get the lucky 5 in the middle. Here we go. So here is my finished bottom of my cake. I'll put that to one side while I mix up my cake. And on to making the cake part of this, which is called a cottage pudding in my cookbook, which is a cup of sugar, just good old white sugar, and 1/3 of a cup of butter, which at room temperature. Now the recipe calls for shortening, but I prefer to substitute butter for that. And if you'd rather use margarine or you'd rather use shortening, feel free to do so, because it's your cake. Make sure it's at room temperature, because you need to cream your butter and your sugar together. Let's look at this. That doesn't look very cool, does it? So if it's softened, it will cream a lot easier. Just kind of mash that butter into the sugar with the back of your spoon. Helps if you have a nice sturdy wooden spoon to work with, like this one, and it just kind of keep mashing it into the sugar until you have combined the two together. This is where baking is part chemistry and it's part of physical mixing together of ingredients, but it's also part chemistry. If you have to mix, you have to combine the sugar and the butter together. They become something a little different, and they'll react differently to your egg than if they're just sitting here in the bowl and you slop an egg in here. It's going to turn out to be a rather different result than if you've creamed this together. It's a bit tedious on the old wrists. Good workout for the wrist muscles and the upper arm muscles. Sometimes I have to take a bit of a break because I'm a bit out of practice going by hand instead of using my electric beater. This is very easy when you use a stand mixer. Let me tell you, just pop these in and don't even really have to worry if the butter's that warm, or if it's at room temperature, if it's cold from the fridge. The mixer doesn't really mind, but my shoulder does. Makes a difference to me if I'm doing it by hand, and that's how I'm doing it today. Just a wooden spoon and a spatula today. I'm going to use I'm going to try to keep this simple and easy in the kitchen for somebody who doesn't own a lot of special fancy gear. It's not hard to cook. It takes a little bit of exercise and a little bit of time and patience to do this. Let's just get this combined. And when it's together, the sugar, the white sugar will disappear and the butter will take on a different texture than butter. It'll just be combined, the two together. And then when you add your egg and vanilla to this, it's not like you're trying to beat it into sugar and oil, which is, you know, vegetable shortening or butter. The egg will not combine properly if you just have butter and sugar sitting here in this bowl, if you haven't combined them. But once you've combined them, it will beat in here nicely, and so will your vanilla. That looks very different than the butter and sugar separately in the bowl. And now I'm going to move on to the next ingredient, which is 1 egg and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So I'll put my egg in here. Take a chance that I'm not going to drop a piece of eggshell in there. Boldly. And 1 teaspoon of vanilla goes in there. There we go. And here we go. There's your egg and your vanilla in there, and I'm just going to beat these together. And then you'll have a nice light, till you have a nice light batter. What's it say exactly? Beat until light and fluffy. That's what it was. So you just keep beating until light and fluffy. Which you can do with a handheld mixer or a stand mixer, or you can just use a wooden spoon in a bowl like I'm doing right here, right now. There now, see how that is? Light and fluffy. Now it says to add your dry and liquid ingredients alternately. So in my flour, I'm supposed to blend or sift together. Dry ingredients, I'm going to blend together 1½ cups of flour, which I have in here. That's all-purpose flour, Canadian. Bread flour for you, for the Americans, and strong flour for you in the UK. And let's see. 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and that is baking powder, not baking soda. So there's my one. 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Let's see. There. Something I want to mention to you, while I'm doing this, if I'm here by myself and not filming this, I usually like to put away my ingredients as I add them, because then I know, okay, I added that to my batter. If I look over and I've got, oh, a box of salt sitting out, uh-oh, I didn't put my salt in. So I like to take out all of my ingredients before I start, just to make sure I'm not out of something, and then I like to put them away as I use them. In here, I've got my flour, my baking powder, and my salt, and I'm just going to give this a little stir around to kind of combine those ingredients. I'm going to add this as 3 dry and 2 liquid. So I'm going to add about 1/3 of my flour here. This, and beat that in. And over here I have my 1 cup of milk measured out, and I'm going to be adding 1/2 of this to this batter right now. I don't bother scraping down my bowl until I have everything in here, and then I'll scrape down my bowl. So there we go. Get that in. Your batter starts to get thinner, thicker, whatever, as you go. I'm preheating my oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and I think that's 173 Celsius. I'll be checking that in the description file below. Now, half of what's left here of my flour. It's starting to look very cakey now. And if you start getting a cramp in your arm, you can always stop and rest for a second. You don't have to beat continuously or something awful will happen to your cake. You can just take a break for every second every now and then. The other, now for the rest of my milk goes in here. There we go. And as you can see, after the milk goes in, this is quite a thin batter. I'm going to scrape this. I'm going to add the rest of my flour here. And then I will be add the rest of my flour, and then I'm going to scrape down my bowl. And then I'll pour this on top of my base, which, like I said, it can be, you could use pineapple, you can use rhubarb, you can use apples, you could use peaches, and have whatever kind of upside down cake you want. And hopefully, when this is all baked, and I turn it up on side of my turn it right side up on my serving platter, it's going to turn out as pretty as the picture in my cookbook. Fingers crossed. Okay, now there's your batter. It's not a real super thin one, but it's not super thick either. It's kind of a cake, it's a real cake batter. And I'm going to scrape this off. I'm going to make sure all my flour is combined before I put this into my baking pan. I'm just going to scrape down my bowl. It's good to have a good scraper in your kitchen and a good sturdy wooden spoon to use when you're doing this sort of thing. It's kind of one of those basic things. And for a good sturdy mixing spoon, wooden spoon, you may have to pay a bit for it, but you'll have it for a lifetime, so it's kind of an investment. Those cheap little ones from the dollar store, especially the ones made out of softwood, will snap, and that's no good. Or they'll start to splinter, and that's not good. You do not want to use a wooden spoon that has splinters, because those splinters will get in your food, and you do not want wood splinters in your food. So do yourself a big favor, and look for something that's at least made out of hardwood. Maple, oak, something that will last you, and it will stand up to mixing and so on. A nice sturdy one. Okay, now I'm going to just pour my batter over this, and then into my oven it goes, because my oven is already up to temperature. I turned that on before. And here's my bowl, nice and scraped out. I'm just going to scrape off my scraper. Make sure I get every bit of this batter. And that big mixing bowl, you'll see that in a lot of my videos because I use it a lot. It's kind of my go-to mixing bowl because it's a good size for whatever I'm doing. Now, this is considered to be 9 servings of this cake, so if you're making a cake for a dessert for your family, 9 servings is lots. And it also says to serve this warm. In there, last little bit. Okay. And now my cake, my finished kept cake here is now going to go into a preheated 350-degree Fahrenheit oven for 35 to 40 minutes. And I will bring you back when it's cooked to show you what the final cake looks like. And I might even have you a present for when I dump it onto my serving platter. So you can keep your fingers crossed with me and hope it all comes out in one big piece. Hi everybody, and here I am once again back with my pineapple upside down cake, and I'm just going to flip this over on the pan, off the pan onto my serving plate, and keep your fingers crossed that it works out just great. And here I am with my grandson's Legos, and here goes the cake. 1, 2, 3, here it goes. Aha! Look at that. One beautiful pineapple upside down cake, a real 1960s, 70s treat. There you go. With all the pineapple rings and everything ready to go. So, grandson, I love you and I miss you, and I hope to see you next summer. So, anyway, it's bye from me. I hope you will like, subscribe, and comment about this video, and I would hope that you will be watching me again next time on Ruby's Classic Cooking. Bye for now.